Devil May Cry, the beginning of one of the most action-packed series featuring that one wacky guy from Devil May Cry 4. What it's like to return to the classics. I have to do a dumb challenge again, don't I? So the original DMC is actually perhaps my favorite game in the series, mostly due to the unique setting and combat mechanics. And it's due to all of this that an epiphany came to mind when brewing up an idea of what to do with this game challenge-wise. I should try beating the game using only guns. Now, what exactly do I mean by this? Well, it's quite simple actually. First off, swords aren't guns, so they are not allowed unless required for progression. Second, combat items are not allowed to be used, like Vital and Devil Stars. And finally, the most important rule here is to have fun. That last part probably doesn't actually matter, but, you know, I needed some motivational help during some portions of all of this. With that said, I think we need to move on to the real point of this video. So, without further ado, let's rock!
Devil May Cry. In that case, you should be used to this sort of thing.
Unfortunately, it doesn't actually end here. So after meeting with our two main characters that every action game has to contain, the cocky red attire-wearing daredevil, and a woman, we hear more about their objective to defeat the demon Mundus. And once the two finally arrive at the island castle destination, gameplay ensues. After grabbing a few things from the outside area here, I move on in and we reach the first mission. The first mission itself isn't really anything special, as it serves as the same usual tutorial most games have. Though clearly I needed a tutorial because I make a mistake and hit a nearby set of armor and force a reset. In any case, Dante finds a strange rusty key further in, though the holder clearly had a claim to it. And now, time for combat. Yeah, this is pretty much all that's going to happen throughout this challenge. By using the key on the blue door in the central area, we now find a somewhat unimportant room with an equally unimportant plane in it, which totally won't be needed later. As much as I hate to admit it, it's also in this room that it becomes clear that guns can't be used for everything. So, following Dante using his trusty sword momentarily, we enter an underground chamber, clear out the foes beneath, and return above to then continue into the next mission. The second mission here starts off pretty normal. Well, it's normal if you ignore the part where Dante gets impaled and actually dies this time. No, not really. Anyway, we get a new sword which would be useless normally, but it thankfully gives use to the good old devil trigger that was definitely missed. Making use of this devil trigger, Dante is able to break a table in the nearby library and receive a shotgun in return. And unlike the sword, this one can actually be used on its own. Further in, the shotgun proves that even it is not powerful enough to move an altar, so I temporarily make use of the sword again to move it out of the way. We then find a staff, head back into the library, and meet a set of sentient safety scissors. The shotgun clears them easily, and with them out of the way, we use the staff to create a path into the next mission. Like the previous one, this third mission here is pretty standard at first glance. However, upon trying to take the strange object positioned in the middle of this cathedral, it seemingly opens up a new path for us. Once we head across the newly shown bridge, and then realize we have to return from whence we came, the bridge collapses and forces us to go through Mr. Bones' wild ride all over again. After the skeleton of fun is done with, we return to the center of the cathedral and retrieve the sign. Though, something isn't quite right. Oh, hey, look, it's that one boss from Devil May Cry 2. It's so cool when they bring back bosses from other games in the series. So, Phantom and Dante have a bit of back and forth banter, and after they're done flirting with one another...
What a big surprise. I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours.
They decide to duke it out. Admittedly, Phantom is a bit more challenging to deal with when not being able to just melee spam him to death with Devil Trigger activated, so it does take quite a bit of tinkering to get a strategy to work around his swooping moveset. After some time, Phantom decides it's his time to head on out, and we take our own leave to finish off this mission. I'm sure you know what's going on here. The fourth mission starts off pretty normal. Oh, never mind, here he comes again. Once our grand escape from Phantom finishes, we use the sign to reveal a lion statue, which unfortunately requires more sword usage, as guns aren't magical enough. An enemy shadow is revealed from it, which thankfully is extremely vulnerable to Dante's trusty handguns, so the battle ends up being a short one. We then grab a sword from the spiraling staircase chamber, and use it to retrieve the entrapped soul. Out from the nearby mirror, however, comes in Nilo Angelo, who invites us to a bit of a bash outside. With his offer taken up on, we head on outside and Nilo jumps on in to start up the fun. Nilo is not made using only guns in mind, which yet again makes this encounter awkward, but thankfully the shotgun makes quick work of him at short range. Once he retreats upwards, I switch Dante's gun to Ebony and Ivory as the two Dark Knights continue their fight over the large distance. The fight continues for a while longer than it should have been, but eventually it ends, and Dante teleports closer up to finish the job. Unfortunately, he forgets he can't use his sword, but the encounter ends abruptly as Nilo realizes he too is doing a challenge run and needs to do a quick reset on his end. With that out of the way, the mission is cleared and we continue onwards. Immediately as we start the next mission, the soul within Dante's inventory ignites, which seemingly attracts a nearby shadow. With it quickly finished, we head upwards to return to the center stairwell before hopping on downwards and entering into the door below to finish off this very short mission. Mission 6, like the first mission, requires a key to move on forwards, which we managed to find a similarly rusty one from within a sewer room. This does attract the nearby Dark Souls 3 fly enemies, so Dante makes use of his highly advanced swatter to clear the room in record time. With the key used, we continue into a new set of hallways in this watery area, and unfortunately run into probably the hardest foe in this entire game. Inside this electrical trap, a death scissor reveals itself, which has a combined set of dangerous abilities, high amount of health, and generally fast mobility that, overall, combines for it to become a massive nuisance. Not being able to do downward sword strikes severely limits the amount of damage that can be done to the enemy here, as guns are only able to slowly chip away at it. All of this leads up to the first death of the run, but thankfully this will be the only death, right? It wasn't. After using up 3 of my yellow orbs on this one minor enemy, it eventually falls and we can finally grab the guiding light from nearby to finish off this dreadful experience. Mission 7 features the normal item that hurts you gimmick that future games make use of, so we'll have to be quick on our feet. After retreating from our favorite fire scorpion boy, we move back into the stairwell from earlier. Sadly, the bugs from before crowd so badly in here that I accidentally kill one of them with my sword and force a reset, but after properly clearing them out the next time, the trigger is activated to help us upwards. In the bedroom, we use the guiding light to open up a hidden pathway, and we use it to end the mission. Mission 8 seems quiet at first, but that calm atmosphere ends abruptly as Phantom suddenly rings the school bell. Phantom decides to make use of new attacks throughout this, so better positioning is key when forced into the usual ranged-only moveset. By choosing the right time to attack consistently, Dante is able to whittle down the fiery foe, and in time, he falls for the last time. Quite literally in this case, actually. We then get a glimpse into the true background of Dante in the cutscene afterwards, of which Trish seems to take note of as well. After we grab the trident from the ground and move into the room below, we find the grenade gun. And while I would love to use it, I will be forcing myself not to use it for, honorable reasons. Since magically enhanced guns can't move a lever, Dante uses his sword in a forced manner yet again. With the bridge let down, we use the trident from before to clear a path and head on through the gates to clear the mission. The 9th mission lets us finally explore the outdoors, which ends up forcing us into an awkward encounter with some lizard people. After a bit, we find ourselves in a platform arena, which then leads us upwards to retrieve the Fire Gauntlet Ifrit. As we head on out, we are then assaulted by a feathery foe, which leads Dante to shouting out some unnecessary expletives.
F*** off, Featherface!
This obviously enrages him, and the battle begins. Since this fight was made with guns being the main source of damage, it ends up being very straightforward. With a bunch of shots fired, the bird finally takes his leave, and we do the same in turn with a quick use of Ifrit. Dante gets into a bit of a duel in a foggy arena with a bunch of foes, and then eventually finds himself in a new courtyard. By using up some red orbs, the door nearby is opened, and we move within to finish up the mission. Mission 10 is aptly named Canyon of Mist, as that's basically all that is seen in this entire maze of a level. This segment works in a somewhat simple way. Essentially, a white orb needs to be followed, but it jumps between enemies nearby until enough of them have been defeated. It goes pretty smoothly for the most part, as Devil Trigger, Ebony, and Ivory make quick work of most foes. Once the enemies are defeated, the orb will then show which path to take to continue onwards. However, the third phase of this trail sees Dante facing off against a ton of the blades like before. This ends up becoming a massive hassle, as it takes a long time to defeat each and every one of them with only guns. Eventually, the orb decides to finally show where to go, and we then run into a pair of Cyclops within a new courtyard. Though, due to a combination of the bulkiness of the enemies, and my general self playing just badly during the fight, I end up dying again. Luckily, the restart point is after the Mist Canyon, so after taking the fight more carefully, both of the rock scorpions are felled and we continue into the next mission. Mission 11 contains not much of note beyond a crowded tunnel segment and trying to ignore a very clingy death scythe. Once we retrieve the Sign of Chastity, we move on into the following area, which then sees us using the strange organ to gain the entrapped chalice. It seems all the commotion attracted Dante's rival here, Nilo Angelo, who once again jumps into the action to continue from where they left off. The fight is pretty much the same as how it was earlier in the game, but with it being in a much more enclosed space. Nilo is seemingly more aggressive too, which does end up making it harder to safely engage him at range when he teleports more often. With the drawn-out fighting coming to an end, Nilo takes his leave, which then allows us to make use of the chalice to reveal an exit to finish off this level. The 12th mission of this game starts off with one of the worst jump scares imaginable. Yes, we do need an underwater level in the game from the early 2000s. In any case, the water segment here goes fast, and we reach the interior of the ship to grab the needle gun. Trying to enter the main chamber of the ship summons a Death Scissor, who surprisingly is downed with not much trouble. The ship then seems to start moving on its own, with braziers all around igniting in turn. All seems right as the journey of the ship continues, but just as things seemed calm, Griffon decides to swoop on in to block our path forwards. The second fight here with the big bird is simple. Press the shoot button and dodge the lightning bird. After a short minute of fighting, Griffon gives up for a second time, and we make our way inside of the cabin to end the mission. Mission 13 here begins with us grabbing the Staff of Hermes from nearby, though clearly the ship took this rather personally. The rest of the mission ends up being an underwater shooter where a collective of blades ends up becoming porcupines solely from the endless needle spam needed. Now imagine if the needle gun wasn't a gun here. That would... it wouldn't be good. Anyway, the level ends off just as fast as it started, and we move on to a new mission afterwards. Mission 14 starts off with Dante running through a suspicious underground segment, which, upon retrieving a shield from a helpful skeleton, seems to be filled with booby traps. With some professional movements, Dante quickly makes his escape, and we now find ourselves once again in the outdoors. After a short trip through some cliffside segments, cave areas, and crowded courtyards, we then use some red orbs to cross a barrier. Further in, we enter through a sealed doorway and continue on to the next level. Starting in Mission 15, the game begins to pick up the pace with everything that is going on, which is quite clear given by the continued usage of the booby traps like before. Dante takes in a bit more poison than he probably would have wanted, but eventually we do get past the obstacles and grab the pair of lances. With these, we return to the central area from the start of this mission and use the lances to remove the blocking decoration upon the door. Within, a coliseum is revealed, and upon heading into the center, our favorite electrical bird from above heads on in for one final battle. The fight itself is very similar to that of the first Griffon duel, but the boss here now has access to way more abilities and forces more dodging. Partway through, Griffon takes a nasty hit and is forcefully grounded. Unfortunately, this ends up just enraging him, and now he decides to take the fight directly to Dante himself. Anyway, the fight is basically no different from a regular playthrough, so Griffon falls with relative ease. Oh, he also gets impaled a bit after that. Now I'm just feeling bad for the big bird. Mundus clearly takes Griffon's loss personally, and in turn decides to just evaporate the bird from existence. Dante then decides to talk more with Trish about his background, as well as his reasons for why he's fighting Mundus. We then head through the new path leading downwards, while completely ignoring all of the failed attempts from before, and then grab the Wheel of Destiny to complete this mission. Mission 16 has the usual intro of Dante just running through a bunch of areas, though this changes back at the entrance of the castle. By using the wheel from earlier, the bridge drops on down again, and we continue back inside. Following a quick activation of a normal hit trigger, an electrical bat from above is summoned, who then gives us quite the stink eye. After quickly defeating it using devil trigger gun attacks, we then continue through the halls from earlier in the game and return to the cathedral. However, there seems to be an oddly placed puddle. Looking within seems to summon up Devil May Cry 2 itself, or in this case, my Nightmare. Get it? The boss is called Nightmare, and Devil May Cry 2 is a game in the series which people don't. So Nightmare forces Dante into an alternate evil realm, where we yet again run into Mr. Bones and run into a vision of Phantom. Once they're all defeated, we return to the overworld and begin the real fight. Nightmare can't take damage normally unless vulnerable, which requires sword usage in order to activate the triggers within the room. Most of the attacks are pretty easy to maneuver around, and Devil Trigger shotgun shots do a massive amount of damage to the weak point when it is revealed. Several uses of Dante's boomstick later, the fight reaches its end and we move outside. While you're supposed to cross the bridge here, I end up making a bit of a blunder and have to deal with you-know-who again down here. In any case, back up above, we use the staff we got much earlier to activate a set of portals. Once we enter the one on the left, the mission reaches its end and we move into the next one. The 17th mission begins with us going through a stairwell and hopping through another portal like before. It's within this portal that things change up, as we are then ambushed by some foes giving us the cold shoulder. Following some heavy gun usage with Ifrit's Devil Trigger, the pair falls. Through another set of corridors and angry enemies, we reach what seems to be a museum with a furious fossil, which once again forces some sword swipes as guns can't deflect fireballs. Who could have known that? Once it explodes and a light is put into position, the item we need shows itself, and after a quick platforming puzzle, we reach it and obtain the Quicksilver. With it being used on a fancy door back in the main hallway, we enter into a dark chamber and run into Nilo Angelo waiting within. They, of course, banter for a bit.
A man with guts and honor. I like that.
And just as it seems a normal fight will begin like before, Nilo reveals his true identity to us. Now he's a little motivated.
Scum.
Like the duo of fights before, Nilo has strong ranged as well as melee capabilities and constantly pressures Dante during the fight. Unlike before, however, he reveals his true power during all of this, as he now has access to a variety of summon sword techniques that often accompany his own combos. Because of his high damage output, the fight ends up being a bit closer than the other ones, but Nilo eventually is defeated once and for all. Dante later discovers an amulet that was dropped by Nilo as he dispersed, which finally reveals to the Dark Knight who his rival was the entire time: Virgil. We also get to see more of the funny statue man, Mundus, who seems to be plotting something quite devious with Trish, who definitely won't betray us later. In any case, the mission ends after this, and we continue into the next one. Mission 18 starts off with the two amulets Dante has coming together with Force Edge to reveal its true power as Sparda. Unfortunately, it's not a gun, and doesn't allow for Devil Trigger, so it's gonna be stuck in the inventory purgatory for the time being. We then swim through some underwater cells and a ghostly plaza room before finally managing to return to a familiar stairwell. Using a trigger to allow us to swim upwards makes the Philosopher's Egg above obtainable, and outside in a nearby courtyard it is used to prepare a special blue stone. The action does, however, attract Nightmare, who decides to, yet again, throw us into its magical realm. After doing the usual thing of blowing up skeletons and defeating the boss of the area, this time being our good friend Griffon, we return back to the overworld and beat up the slime mess, who's basically the same as before in combat. Or at least it mostly is, minus the spinning weapon it throws around occasionally. Once it's defeated, we grab the transformed egg, which is now the elixir, and the mission concludes with our preparation now set. Mission 19 is the point of no return for Dante, as after running through old hallways and portals, we return to a recognizable bedroom and enter within the mirror Nilo used earlier in this journey. It is within this mirror realm we discover the Nightmare Beta, which we aren't going to use, and then head outside to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone, the key to the underworld. The residents of this realm did not take too kindly to tampering with this stone, however, as Dante is then ambushed by some nobodies. The shotgun makes very quick work of them, and once we return to the real world using the mirror like before, we cross the broken bridge, or at least try to and mess up on the exact last jump, and enter within that puddle we saw before. It's within this strange area we use the Philosopher's Stone from before to open a path into the underworld. As we hop in, the level ends off and we move into the next mission. The 20th mission acts as the beginning of our adventure into the underworld, which sees us moving through some nasty-looking areas before ending up in a wide, rune-laden room. Just as Dante moves in to help out a conveniently in distress Trish, Nightmare approaches yet again to initiate their final bout. As usual, we get engulfed and flung into the bottomless pit of Mr. Bones' Nightmare, where we also get to see Nilo again. In any case, the fight goes pretty smoothly, so after the return to the overworld of the underworld, the battle continues. The rest of the entire Nightmare engagement here is pretty normal. However, just as it seems we've won, Trish strikes Dante from the other side of the barrier. How could we have seen this coming? Anyway, she ends up trying to help Nightmare during the rest of the fight, but it's very easy to dodge her attacks. Nightmare itself continues its usual moveset, but just as it is about to be defeated, it suddenly explodes in a rage. While the spam of attacks is quite harmful, some well-timed dodges and shots eventually whittles it down until it falls for sure. With Nightmare felled, the entire arena seems to quake, leading a pillar to crumble towards Trish. Dante, of course, tries to go in and save her, but unfortunately the pair die here and the game ends. In an alternate universe where they did live, Dante then departs the room, choosing to spare Trish solely due to her image being similar to that of his mother. Clearly, Mundus has other ideas though, and the mission here ends with the foreshadowing divulged. Mission 21 starts off as Dante continues throughout this living cave, activating some rather strange-looking triggers, taking on many of the resident demons, and evading some wall worms. Further in, a large room filled with lava proves to be somewhat of a platforming annoyance, but after it is cleared and a gap is crossed, a trigger is yet again activated to allow entry through the large gate in this cavern. Upon heading on in, the mission finishes and we reach what will be the finale. Mission 22, the climax of this entire journey. Everything has led up to this point, and I am somewhat surprised Dante still has ammunition for his weapons here, but I'm sure there's an explanation out there somewhere. Mundus and Dante calmly discuss relevant topics between each other before the big statue dude himself decides to emit a light from his chest like all people can do. This then reveals Trish, who seems to be a captive, though, to be honest, the state of the cuffs really makes this entire thing a bit questionable. Mundus decides to then show off his new party tricks, but Trish, being jealous, wants it for herself. So she ends up pushing Dante out of the way and just takes the cool stuff in for herself. Obviously, Mundus doesn't like this.
Useless scum.
So the two get competitive, and after Dante shows off his own cool tricks, Mundus decides he doesn't want to be just a statue. So he sheds his skin and grows some wings, and honestly, still looks like a statue, but that's not the point. The two of them then end up in space. Mundus tries to convince Dante to side with him or something. Dante then does the meme laser eye thing, and then the pair realize that I don't want to keep writing a script describing all of this, so they finally decide to start the battle. The first phase of the Mundus fight is probably one of the most unique fights in the series, as it essentially is just a normal bullet spam game. And yes, the projectiles coming out from Dante here are indeed gun-related. So the fight only goes on for a short amount of time, as most of the attacks are fairly easy to dodge or destroy when they show up. Making use of the special Devil Trigger attack does a massive amount of damage to Mundus, though just as he is defeated, he strikes Dante down at the same time for the pair to finish up their duel on the ground below. The second phase of this fight is where the real challenge begins. At first, it doesn't seem too bad, as the literal handguns used do an okay amount of damage, and the attacks seem simple enough to get around. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, as Mundus will constantly spawn orbs around the arena, and if the larger ones are not destroyed in time, they will accumulate around the Demon Lord and be forced back at Dante to deal large amounts of damage. So, as expected, we die here. During the second attempt, I then decide to adjust my approach and instead make sure I destroy as many orbs as possible using guns, even though they clearly were made with sword usage in mind instead. Playing through the fight smarter seems to work pretty well, as when timing shots appropriately, dodging incoming attacks better, and taking care of hazards when they come up are combined, Mundus is defeated with relative ease. As he disintegrates in the air above, we are then transported back into the previous room we started this mission in. Dante seems distraught over Trish's apparent state, and it's here that he delivers the absolute hardest line ever in the Devil May Cry series.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
He then leaves Sparda and his amulet with Trish, and after some parting words, the climactic mission comes to its end. But we're not done quite yet. There is still one last mission to finish off here. Mission 23, the real final mission of this game, requires us to escape through everything we've gone through before. So, we do just that. We run through the pulsating underworld, and the cathedral, and hallways beyond. But just as escape seems likely, it seems all done wasn't enough. We fall back into the old sewers, and it's there that Mundus decides to return and get his revenge. So following their short intellectual discussion, the two engage in the final brawl of this game. It's unfortunately extremely easy. Worst of all, Dante can't exactly kill Mundus on his own, but luckily, Trish shows up at the perfect moment, clearly not dead, and infuses Dante with her own power. And it is here we manage to finish this challenge for good with one final line.
Jackpot.
Except the challenge isn't over just yet. We still have a plane section. We even get to use guns on the plane. What game ending is as perfect as this is for the challenge we set out on doing? After the pair fly through a sprawling cavern, the two reach the light of the above world, and just as they fly into the horizon, the game, as well as the challenge, are truly complete. I have to admit, compared to the other entry in this series we did stuff on, Devil May Cry was certainly a lot more fun. Obviously, yeah, the game is possible to beat using only guns, at least if you ignore the triggers needing to be activated by a sword or a few other minor hiccups here and there. There's bound to be more difficult challenges or more interesting things out there to do, both with this game and the others in the series, obviously. But honestly, just as was mentioned in the third rule of this challenge, the most important thing here is having fun. And I definitely had fun during all of this. Thank you for taking this journey along with me, and I hope to see you on the next one.